Subjuntivo. Verbos de cabeza. We're now familiar with how the subjunctive conjugates and the five main categories of subjunctive: cabeza, certeza, opinión, emoción, and deseo. This lesson will focus on verbos de cabeza, verbs of the head. Some examples of verbs in this category are creer, pensar, notar, suponer, and prometer. To believe, to think, to notice, to suppose, and to promise. Verbs in this category are cognitive. They're about thinking or believing something, or supposing or promising something. They're going to be one single verb, and they're going to be about an idea. Let's look at an example. Creo que hablas español. I believe that you speak Spanish. Notice there's going to be two verbs. There's going to be the first verb, creer, that's the verbo de cabeza, and there's going to be a second verb which may or may not be in the subjunctive. The second sentence, pienso que comes manzanas. I think you eat apples. Notice again that there's a first verb, cabeza, and then a second verb which may or may not be in the subjunctive. Noto que vivimos en Barcelona. You notice that we live in Barcelona. First verb and second verb. They suppose that I speak Catalan. First verb and second verb. I promise you that I speak euskera. Prometo is that first verb, cabeza, and then there's a second verb. In each of these sentences, there's going to be a verb 1 and a verb 2. The first one is going to be the verbo de cabeza. They also have a connector that is in between these. In English, we don't necessarily need the connector. For example, I believe that you speak Spanish. In English, we don't need the word that. We can just say, I believe you speak Spanish. But in Espanol, you need to have the connector. So all of these are going to have a verb 1, a verb 2, and a connector. And que is most often the connector between those two verbs. The rule for verbos de cabeza and when you're going to use subjunctive is if the first verb is negative, the second verb will become subjunctive. And you'll notice that none of these verbs in these 5 sentences are subjunctive yet because they're all positive. There's no doubt or whatsoever or uncertainty in any of these verbs. I believe you speak Spanish. I think you eat apples. They're all certain. Now, however, if you add a no in front of the first verb, you're going to add uncertainty into that sentence. I don't believe that you speak Spanish. Once you introduce uncertainty with no in front of the first verb, you have to have the second verb in the subjunctive. I don't believe that you speak Spanish is no creo que hables. Same goes for the second sentence. I don't think, now you're not certain, you're introducing doubt into the sentence when you put no in there. So the second verb becomes subjunctive. No pienso que comas manzanas. The third sentence will be the same. No notas que vivamos en Barcelona. No suponen que hablo catalán becomes no suponen que hable catalán. Now there are a couple exceptions even in this rule. If the sentence is an exclamatory sentence, it has the exclamation points before and after, then it will not be in the subjunctive. They don't suppose that I speak Spanish. If it's an exclamation, if it's an exclamatory sentence, it stays in the indicative. The second verb does. The same goes if it's in a question. Don't they suppose that I speak Catalan? Once it becomes an interrogatory sentence, it will also be indicative in the second verb, hablo. Let's look at this last one because there's another exception down here. No te prometo que hablo euskera. I don't promise you that I speak euskera. If the subject for the first verb is the same subject as the second verb, then the second verb will not change into the subjunctive, even though it's negative. No te prometo que hablo euskera. If, however, you change subjects, I don't promise you that they speak euskera, you went from I to they, now the second one has to be the subjunctive. Whereas the first one is, I promise you that I speak euskera, this one won't change. But if you change the subjects, I don't promise you that they speak euskera, then the second one has to be in the subjunctive if there's a no in front of the first verb. So to summarize, there's always going to be two verbs and phrases with verbos de cabeza. The first verb is always going to be the verbo de cabeza, creer, pensar, notar, suponer, prometer, among many others. Verb 1, this first verb, this verbo de cabeza itself, will never be in the subjunctive. It's the second verb that may or may not be in the subjunctive, and what determines that is if the first one has a no in front of it, the second one is subjunctive. So the rule is simple. Verb 1 is no, Verb 2 is subjunctive. No equals subjunctive for verbos de cabeza. That was our lesson on the first section of verbos de cabeza.